I now call to order the August 1, 2012 regular meeting of the Hampton City School Board. Ms. Bowers, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Harper?
Here.
Ms. Henry? Here. Mr. Kilgore?
Here.
Mr. Pearson?
Here.
Ms. Phillips?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Mugler?
Here. Let the record show that all of our board members are in attendance, as well as our City School Board attorney, Ms. Nancy Reeves, our clerk, Ms. Carolyn Bowers, and our superintendent, Dr. Linda Shiflett, who you may notice is moved from the side to front and center with us here. And as well, I'd like to welcome our new student liaison, Mr. Alan Booth. And at this time, I'll turn things over to you for some introductions.
Tonight, I'd like to introduce Miss Michaela Mon, a rising 7th grader at Jefferson Davis Middle School, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and tonight's invocation. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. My name is Michaela Munn. I am a rising 7th grader at Davis Middle School. To the school board chair, Ms. Martha Mugler, Superintendent Dr. Linda Shiflett, school board and attendees, I would like to share the following poem, Define Yourself, by Karen Mortensen. You are a part of all that surrounds you. Celebrate your connection to life as you step into the future. Your abilities can take you to the top, but it is your character that will keep you there. Build your character well, for it is your foundation of your being. The enemies you will face will not build your character, they will reveal it. Unlock your potential. Every moment has a hidden gift. Discover and dream. You will create your tomorrows by what you dream today. Dreams are the touchstones of your tomorrows. This is your time. This is your life. Seize the moment. Delight in your youth. Life is your canvas, and no one can paint it but you. Inside you is the key to everything you can imagine and more. Learn from yesterday. Live for today. You are the hope for tomorrow.
Thank you, Michaela, for that excellent poem.
Thank you.
Now, if you might remain standing for a minute, I would just like to get to know you a little better on behalf of the board. So we all know you're a student at Jefferson Davis Middle School. What's your favorite subject there?
I like social studies.
Any
and
particular
science.
reason why?
I just like history, and I had a really nice social studies teacher this year.
Good grade.
I'm sure she'd be glad to hear that. Do you play any sports at Davis?
No.
No. So, do you have any family or support, principals, teachers here tonight?
Yes. I have my great aunt and my little sister and my uncle and my school principal from Davis here tonight.
Well, thank you again, Michaela.
Thank
and
you.
It was a pleasure having you here tonight.
Thank you.
Very well done, Michaela. And thank you for joining us. We move now to the recognition portion of our meeting. We'll be joined up here by our Executive Director of Public Relations and Marketing, Ms. Ann Stevens, and I believe Dr. Linda Shiflett will be assisting with recognitions tonight slightly.
Slightly.
As well as from our board, Mr. Dave Pearson.
Thank you, Ms. Mugler, Mr. Kilgore, members of the board, Dr. Shiflett, Superintendent, members of the division leadership team, members of the Hampton City Schools family, and those watching us at home on television. You know, every time I come up here, where'd Mr. Pearson go? Here you go, Mr. Pearson. Every time I come up here when we have our televised meetings, a lot of times you will hear me talk about how blessed we are in Hampton City Schools. And I wanted to start the recognitions by giving you a little bit of information. Prior to my coming to the meeting tonight, I stopped by to visit one of our assistant principals, Kevin Davis. Kevin is the assistant principal at Kickerton High School, longtime assistant principal at Phoebus High School. And I asked him if I could share this, and he did not have a problem with it. But last week, Kevin had an accident at his boat where he slipped and fell at night in the dark, rendered unconscious, and fell into the water. Nobody knew for a couple of minutes that he was even in the water, but luckily enough, there was a friend of his who was leaving the boat, who was with him, who just happened to be there, hear the splash. That friend just happened to be an EMT. That friend just happened to be a big EMT, which would be needed to get Kevin out of the water after 3 unsuccessful tries of diving in and coming up short. Needless to say, a few hours later, Kevin was in the ICU on every kind of breathing apparatus you can imagine. His breathing was not 10%, it was 0. But because we had somebody looking over Kevin Davis, and because that EMT was there to save him, I just wanted you to know that this family called Hampton City Schools was there day and night through phone calls, through text messages, through visits to his family. And when I went to visit Kevin Davis today, it was not at the hospital. He was released yesterday. It was at home. He opened the door for me because today was also his wife's birthday. So I don't know how many of you believe in miracles, but I think those kinds of things speak to it. And I asked her today, right before I left, I said, I'll try to come back. Tell me what you want for your birthday. And she said, when I woke up this morning and looked to the left and saw my husband, I knew that was the gift I wanted for the rest of my life. So let's all join in wishing him a speedy, speedy recovery and his wife a happy birthday. Incidentally, the EMT's name was Michael Small, and he's a big guy, so they call him Biggie Small. So, and he's with the Newport News Fire Department. Now, to talk about another one of our blessings in Hampton City Schools is to have the talented students that we do have in this school division, and to have instructional leaders and curriculum leaders and teachers who push our students to excel in all ways. And with that said, I'd like to call on Diane Foster, who is the president of Sister Cities of Hampton.
Chairman Mugler, school board members, Dr. Shiflett, good evening. It gives me great pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of Sister Cities International to recognize one of Hampton City Schools' bright and talented students, Joshua Williams. Sister Cities dates its beginning from a White House conference on citizen diplomacy, which was convened in 1956 by President Dwight D. Eisenhower to bring together citizens forging ties with communities abroad. From President Eisenhower to President Obama, every president has served as the honorary chairman for Sister Cities International. The city of Hampton has participated in the Sister Cities movement since late 1950s, and we do have 4 sister cities. They are Anyang, South Korea, Southampton, England, Pietermaritzburg, South Africa, and Vendôme, France. Each year, Sister Cities International sponsors the Youth Artist Showcase, and the showcase encourages youth from around the globe to express Sister Cities' mission through their artwork. Only one United States artist is chosen, and only one international artist is chosen. So you can see the magnitude of this award. Joshua Williams, and if we can give him a round of applause, is our United States winner. Joshua was awarded a complimentary registration to the Sister Cities International Conference, which was recently held in Jacksonville, Florida. Everything paid, the accommodations, the travel, food, everything. But in addition to that, tonight, Joshua, I would like to present to you a certificate from Sister Cities International. And it says, Sister Cities International is proud to recognize Joshua Williams as the U.S. Grand Prize winner in the 2012 Young Artist Showcase, Youth as a Catalyst for Change. And more importantly to Joshua, I'm sure, will be the $1,000 check that goes with that. So,
Josh, need you up there still. I want to follow up on the phrase that Ann Stevens-Cherry used, pushing the students. Our students have tremendous art talent, but the parents, the principals, and the art teachers really push these students to achieve the highest level that they can in that particular field. Now, if you watched our school board meetings, we recognized several students in the area of art throughout the Hampton City Schools for their talent. But tonight is Joshua's night. So Joshua, on behalf of our chairman, Martha Mugler, and our superintendent, Linda Shiflett, I'd like to present this certificate to you, certificate of achievement. The Hampton City School Board congratulates Joshua Williams, Hampton High School, grand prize winner of the Sister Cities International Young Artist Contest for his linoleum print artwork entitled Cotton Club Crescendo. And it's on the screen.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Again, he's an international winner. And in talking about pushing students, we'd like to call on our curriculum leader for fine arts, Vivian Greasy, who is in the audience. Please stand. We recognize she does such a great job with our students and our program. And are your parents here, Joshua? We'd like you please to stand and be recognized. You've got an international winner. Great job. Thank you.
I'd like for Carolyn Bowers to join us on stage. This is one that Ann Stevens-Cherry cannot hand to herself, I suppose. But anyway, the National School Public Relations Association is an association that recognizes outstanding achievement for departments of public relations and marketing. Now, before I read this award, I want to say that it's significant to note that our Department of Public Relations and Marketing has received several of these awards before. This is not the first. So the National School Public Relations Association has recognized the talent and ability and the product that this department has put out, and of course the other staff members who may not be here tonight. So tonight, another award. The National School Public Relations Association awards the Golden Achievement Award in recognition of exemplary public relations to Hampton City Schools for a recipe for success, which was introduced a few months ago for School Board Appreciation Night. So tonight we have Ann Stevens-Cherry and Carolyn Bowers. Let's give them a hand.
And as you can see the pictures on the screen, and we were very pleased to do it for many, many reasons, but we were most pleased because we were doing it for a school board that has always been committed to our children. And we didn't want to just give you a certificate like they had suggested that we do and just say thank you. We wanted to take it up to the top because you guys are the best. So we wanted to thank you in our very own way. Thanks again. And now we turn it over to Dr. Shiflett.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens-Cherry. It's indeed my pleasure now to introduce some new administrators to Hampton City Schools for school year 12-13. First of all, let me ask that as I call your name, please come on up to the stage and stay up here until all the names are called, and all of the parents and spouses and family members, supporters, if you would just hold your applause until everyone comes up on the stage, please. Thank you. First of all is Dr. Cynthia Cooper. Dr. Cooper returns to Hampton City Schools after a short period of time with Newport News Public Schools. She is our new Executive Director of Research, Planning, and Evaluation. Come on up. You can just start the line over there. Thomas Shelgren comes to us from Isle of Wight Public Schools, and he will be joining us as a special education coordinator. From York County Schools, Tricia Mills will be joining us as a special education coordinator. Previously, the assistant principal at both Langley and Phillips Elementary Schools, Mrs. Elizabeth Franks, will be joining us as our new principal of Smith Elementary School. Mr. John Elling will be assuming the position of interim principal at Tarrant Elementary. Previously, he was an assistant principal at both Machen and Armstrong Elementary Schools. Previously a teacher and Title I tutor with Hampton City Schools, Ashley Ide is now an assistant principal at Barron Elementary. Karen Johnson is the new assistant principal at Tyler Elementary, and she comes to us from Newport News Public Schools. And I'm very pleased to announce that the former interim principal at Booker during the last school year, Millicent Rogers, is now the real principal at Booker Elementary. And by the same vein, interim principal at Phoenix Pre-K through 8 last year was Anita Owens. She is now the real principal at Phoenix. Serving as interim principal at Phillips Elementary during the last school year, Heidi Brzezinski is now the principal at Phillips Elementary. And joining her is her little shadow. But we're all about family here. From Norfolk Public Schools, Mary Whirling will be the assistant principal at Phoenix Pre-K through 8 school. A former teacher at Langley Elementary School, Jennifer Humble, will now be the assistant principal at Asbury Elementary. Ralph Saunders now becomes a mighty Bruin, becoming the principal of Bethel High School after having served previously as a principal of Kraft Elementary School. From Williamsburg, James City County, Dr. Charmaine Grove becomes the principal of the Mighty Crabbers at Hampton High School. After having served as the interim principal at Kickingham High School last year, Raymond Haynes now becomes the real mighty warrior at Kickingham.
You might say the real deal.
The real deal.
The real deal.
Having served as the principal of Lindsay Middle School, William Beverly is now a phantom, assuming the role of principal at Phoebus High School. A teacher, also known as a learning facilitator at our award-winning Performance Learning Center, Steve Gavin will now be the assistant principal at Jones Middle Magnet School. Coming to us from Newport News Public Schools, Dion Gardner is now the assistant principal at Lindsay Middle School. Please join me in congratulating these people as our new administrators for school year 12-13. Sit down, and then I want all of the family members and the supporters of these people to please stand again. I have to tell you, I am so excited about this school year. We have some amazing people joining our ranks. And I want to thank all of the family members and those of you that are here tonight to support these people. They're going to have a wonderful year ahead of them with the support. And we are so pleased to welcome each and every one of you to the Hampton City Schools family.
Yes, congratulations to those of you who are newly appointed administrators. I know you look forward to your new challenges with great excitement, and we here at this table and beyond have great expectations. Looking forward to great things. We move on now to the consent agenda. Items 2.01, 2.02, 2.03, and 2.04. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mrs. Henry that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. The motion carries. We move now to superintendent and staff reports. I'll turn this over to Dr. Shiflett.
Our first report this evening is about our new campus at Lee. Myra Chambers, our new Director of Alternative and Adult Learning, will be talking to us about the work being done at Lee, but as well as the new programming there. Ms. Chambers?
Good evening, Chairman Mugler and School Board, Dr. Shiflett. I'm hiding over here. Okay. I'm very excited to speak to you this evening and give you an update about the Lee Alternative Learning Center, or as we call it, the Center at Lee, the campus at Lee. And tonight I'm going to give you an overview of what we will house and how these programs are really going to help our students throughout the district. Doing good. The Center at Lee, or the campus at Lee, is going to offer comprehensive services for Bridgeport Academy, which has been established in our school system for a number of years, the Performance Learning Center, ISEP, which houses GED preparation and non-traditional diploma tracks, homebound education, and adult ed. Let's start with Bridgeport Academy. We're going to expand Bridgeport Academy this year to 3rd through 12th grade. Originally, it served middle and high school students. We've also added capacity so we will serve special needs students, which at times were served on homebound services. We're also going to continue the many support services that help make Bridgeport successful. So CSB, there'll be a reading specialist, and a number of wraparound services to help students be successful and to help them transition back into a traditional school. Bridgeport traditionally serves students that have community-related issues, or they have school-related issues that have removed them from that setting temporarily. The Performance Learning Center will house students, and right now we're going to expand it to have both day and twilight program. So we're looking about serving about 150 students. It has individualized coursework, and these are for students who are on a diploma track, but perhaps the traditional large setting is not the ideal place for that student. So they can work in a smaller setting. They get a lot of individualized attention, and it helps them also self-pace. It's got a very strong leadership component and a career component to help them focus on what their plans are after they graduate. ISEP is the Individual Student Alternative Educational Plan, and this is a program that serves students that have to be 16 years of age. It is governed by the state and has strict rules to follow. They do GED preparation. They also do a strong career CTE component as required. These students sometimes are on a non-traditional track, so they may have credits and become discouraged with the traditional school setting and have decided they want a GED. And ideally, what we want to try to do is in the e-learning format, perhaps talk them back into staying on a diploma track. Some students, for various circumstances, have very few credits, and perhaps the diploma is not a realistic goal. And so they would follow a GED track in this setting, so they will offer both. Homebound Services has served students with various issues throughout the district, and primarily will return a lot of their focus to medical issues and psychological issues, various issues that remove students from the traditional school setting. And homebound is served usually with one teacher, and the teacher works one-to-one with the student during the week. Adult ed will encompass having basic literacy, English as a second language, GED preparation, and GED testing. And tomorrow, the adult ESL students will be going to Phoebus for a field trip to see the Blue Phantom Inn. So we're out in the community. What's the advantage to housing all these programs at the campus of Lee? Well, for one thing, each program has certain resources to help students. For instance, Bridgeport offers they have guidance counselors, they have CSB counselors, they have a reading specialist. And at times, other programs such as ISEP or Performance Learning Centers can tap into those resources. So ideally, we can share resources to help students. Additionally, students transition out of many of these programs, and so there could be a seamless transition. So a student perhaps leaving Bridgeport but that does not want to return to a large school setting could transition into PLC or an e-learning center. So that helps students be successful. Additionally, you have a lot of experts in one area. So we have a lot of heads to put together to solve problems for students, to help them be successful, to help every child obtain their educational goal. And that would be it. Very quick. Any questions?
Okay, Ms. Chambers, thank you for your report. Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Henry?
With the Twilight PLC and with adult education offering evening classes so that adults can come after work, what kind of hours is the campus going to be open?
Well, adult GED, the Twilight will be in the late afternoon. So ideally, those students will work in the 4 to 6 time range, or perhaps like 3 to 5. Other students, the adult GED, those classes go later in the evening, and so they will go to 8, past 8, and so there will be some overlap, but they will serve a different array of students at a different time.
And your campus is divided up into sections that are discrete for the programs that they serve.
Correct. Ingenious design, I have to credit Donna Woods for that, Dr. Donna Woods. The Bridgeport will be on the building is divided into 2 halves, and then there's an annex to the rear portion of the building. So on the one side will be Bridgeport Academy. It will be self-contained, and it will work as a functioning school, the wing all to itself. On the other side, there will be adult ed, homebound, and the e-learning centers, the 4 e-learning classrooms. In the rear of the building, which has a separate entrance, there will be the Performance Learning Center. So there are separate entrances for each program. Does that help?
I have a question. I've always said that alternative ed teachers are a special group of teachers and they have to have a certain skill set. I would surmise that since you're adding elementary level students to Bridgeport, what type of teachers are you interviewing or recruiting to be successful working with that type of student?
I think that there are some components that are very important and critical for elementary students to be successful. I think one critical component to every teacher working on this campus is they want to be there. It's very important. They feel passionate about working with students that may not be in a traditional setting of school. And they believe that students can be successful. The second piece is I think that they have strong elementary foundation. They know the core issues. Frequently, students have difficulty and end up off track because of reading and math. And so those skills will be emphasized. They want a strong emphasis so students do well and transition through the classes as they go along. They're going to be enthusiastic, I know that, and they're going to be very passionate. So everybody I have met so far, because now I am new to the program, has just been really like, let's get going. Let's just start this. So I think that that's going to be, you have a ton of enthusiasm and a great wealth of knowledge of the people that we have.
Anything further from board members?
Well, if I just might add, they also now have an enthusiastic leader, and we're very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
And we're looking forward to a tour. Let us know when you're ready for
I think it's coming soon, very, very shortly. We're making great progress.
Great.
So you'll see us in a couple weeks.
Okay, awesome. Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shiflett?
I also want to thank Dr. Donna Woods. Dr. Woods, if you please stand. It was really Dr. Woods' vision and planning that really pulled all of this together. She had the vision to create a campus that would consolidate services, but also be a place where the needs of children could be more effectively met. So thank you, Dr. Woods, for your work.
Dr. Shiflett, your next report?
Our next report is a staffing update by Doctor. You can be a doctor tonight. By Ms. Robin Ruth.
Hi, good evening. Wanted to give you a real quick update on where we stand with staffing for our teachers. It has been a very busy summer. Our principals and Suzanne Marcella and Barbara Warren Jones have been extremely busy. So far we have hired 143 teachers. And we have, and this is an ever-changing number. When I was given this number yesterday afternoon, it was 28. Today it's 21. So you can see we're moving at a very fast pace, but we currently have 21 vacancies. couple of areas that are going to be a little bit hard to fill, but we do anticipate we'll have most of the positions filled by the time school starts. The areas of concern that we have right now are library media. And this is an area-wide. Every school division is scrambling to find library media candidates. So if you know anyone in any of these areas, send them to iRecruitment. Also looking for a couple of foreign language teachers. Anybody who knows anybody who can teach German or speak German, we would love to have them. And also a couple of reading teachers that we're still in need of. But the principals have done a great job with staying up with candidates as they come in, getting offers out quickly, which is a real key so that we don't lose candidates, because some of these candidates are very, very marketable. So everybody has done a great job. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I know your team is terrific because I've been on the other end of this as the recipient of applicants, and your group does just amazing recruiting and advertising for our division, and it's nice that people want to come work here. How are we doing with math and special ed teachers?
We are doing very well so far. We have hired 20 math teachers this year and 19 special ed teachers. We currently have 2.5 math teaching positions open and 1 math coach position that is open. We do anticipate that the part-time math position will actually be absorbed by teachers teaching extra classes at the high school level, and so it's really 2 classroom openings. The math coach is not a classroom position, so it would not immediately impact students when school starts. And as far as special ed, right now we have 2.5 openings. The 0.5 position is actually at Bridgeport. Based on their current student enrollment, they are adequately staffed. We do not really need the 0.5 position on day 1 of school. We do anticipate as the year goes on that we'll need it. So we're obviously going to fill it. But again, it's not a critical position if it is not filled on the first day of school. We have more than enough teachers based on current student enrollment for the special ed population at Bridgeport.
And we always have been concerned about rifts and so forth, and so we have been able to replace a number. We really haven't had anybody that was laid off.
We did not have any teachers that were let go as a result of a reduction in force this year.
Clerical people, we're trying to get back our own people.
Yeah, there were other positions where some folks were let go.
Because the job description changed.
Well, that and there was just a reduction in the positions, and we're working on that for the ones who are eligible to be rehired.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from board members? Okay, thank you, Ms. Ruth.
Thank you.
Dr. Shiflett, you have one more report?
Yes, our last report this evening is about our online benchmark assessment program called Interactive Achievement. As many of you know, we've been moving toward full online testing during the standards of learning, and it's really been our goal for a long time to get to a point where we could actually do our benchmark testing online. It provides us with immediate access to scores and then allows us to have greater opportunity to work with our students for instructional improvement. Ms. Brown will be giving the report tonight. Ms. Brown?
Yes, my clicker doesn't want to work, so I'm going to stand over here tonight. We are going to do, actually, Dr. Lear, would you mind clicking for me? I'm sorry, my clicker didn't have batteries.
Hate when that
Very
happens.
much like me, because I have 2 of them and one of them has batteries, but regardless. I'm kind of short and it's too hard for me to see. We have purchased an online benchmark company called Interactive Achievement to deliver our benchmark program for the 9 weeks assessments that we've been giving for the last 8 years through the SOLAR program. So we can go to the first slide. It was used successfully this past year in Title I schools as a common assessment tool. It was purchased for that purpose. When we used it, we found it had a tremendous capacity to do other things. And so when we put our RFP out, we looked at it as one of the contenders to do that job. It certainly was attractive because of the third bullet here. It is tightly aligned to the Virginia SOL assessment. And in the formatting and the presentation of TestNav, the Pearson product, and as well as the curriculum alignment and being a Virginia company, their focus is on the Virginia SOLs and the Virginia style of testing, and that's very important when you're looking at companies. It will, and it delivers our 41 different benchmark assessments to grades 2 through 11 in 33 different school settings, and that goes on at one time. So that's also an attractive piece that we can do all the things that we do through one delivery system. It provides a tool for creating common assessments in the 4 core areas in all of our classrooms. And this year, that is a perk item in the idea of we want to deliver our benchmarks first. That needs to be our focus for this entire year. But it also enables teachers to write their own assessments. So we've been training them on how to do that. But we want them to be sure that delivering that benchmark successfully is the main focus for this year. It provides a way for us to push out pre and post assessments. You know, the teacher growth model is about measuring where students start and where students finish at the end of the year. And this is going to allow our curriculum people to push those assessments out without having to run copies, bundle packages, deliver them to the schools, and hope that somebody is able to get all the data and put it together in some place we could find it. This way they can load it electronically, let everyone know it's available, and everyone take the test, and we have the data immediately. So we can see where we are at the beginning and at the end. It provides a way to create questions and make them available to teachers immediately. Teachers like to say, this is a new SOL, and we don't have very many questions on that. So we can create test questions right on the program and deliver them immediately to teachers for teacher use. So that was a very attractive piece as well. It provides us 30,000 already aligned questions that we can use for the people who write our benchmarks in our local school system, but also for our teachers. So they actually add questions to the bank twice a month, and we get a preview at the administrative level to see if we would like to hold that question for a benchmark, or would we like to deliver it to teachers and right away. So sometimes we do that, especially with the new material, and sometimes we release it immediately. It's one click to unreserve it and make it available to teachers. It provides instant results. I expect to hear a loud roar of applause the first time the teachers in the secondary schools receive that submit. The student pushes the submit button and they immediately have the score disaggregated in front of them for that student. No waiting, no scanning, no delays. It's right there in front of them, and they can remediate immediately. So not only will that do that for their quizzes, pre-test, post-test, whatever they want to do, it will do it for the benchmark, and that's a tremendous benefit to all our teachers to have that immediately, as well as their administrators. When you click on to Interactive Achievement, this is interactiveachievement.com, they give you an overview of the program, and that's what this page looks like. I chose tonight to give you some screenshots instead of live because there's so many different things I can show you, and a lot of it's confidential because it's tied to students in Hampton and their scores, so I wanted to be careful about that. This is their website, though, and if you want to read about the company, there's quite a bit of information about us, who writes their questions, and what are their beliefs and about the Virginia curriculum and delivering that in a very aligned way. When the teacher goes on, they have 5 components they can look at. They have the assessment library where they can build exams, and where we can build exams, same place. They have a classroom manager where they will assign their students assessments, and they will create test sessions for them in the testing center. And then when they're all done, they will go into the reporting center to see reports. And then there's a help center as well, and I'll kind of talk you through those. This is the assessment library. This is a very cool thing. If you look at this screen, on the left are all of the SOLs for that particular level. That looks like grade 5 math. And on the right, it is grade 5 math, because I can see the bigger print there. On the right are the SOLs from the Virginia State curriculum. So if I'm working, this happened just this week. A teacher said, you know, I can't find mapping anywhere in these questions. And so she said she was sure it was with this particular SOL. And I said, well, you know what? The SOLs are on the right. Let's just take a look. So we did, and we found out in science, mapping is included in scientific investigation, but teachers are used to it being connected to curriculum. So therefore, that's one of the applied skills of scientific investigation, but that's how quick she was able to find where that skill is actually located. So that was really great, and I got to use that already. Next to each SOL tells you how many questions are available from Interactive Achievement for our use and for teacher use. So that's a nice overview picture there of that. Under each one of those, you click a button and it cascades down and shows you all the questions that you can use. This is the picture of that cascade. I wanted to show you that they have a little box in the middle of the description that tells you where the item came from. If it has an IAVA beside it, it's done by Interactive Virginia. If it has an SOL with a number like 2007, 2010, then it's from a release test. So they have reorganized all the release test questions with the new numbers and placed them back in the bank. And then if it says Hampton City, it belongs to us. We developed it. No one can see it in the entire state but us. But our teachers know immediately it was developed by us, especially, usually these questions come from power quizzes and decathlons. This is a teacher view of a question. If they're looking at a question to decide if they like it on their quiz or test, they get to see the view of the question, the answer, and the 3 distractors. Now, when they take the test, the answers are mixed up, and they have A, B, C, D, F, G, H, J, and the teacher can randomize the questions and randomize the answers on any quiz they give. But I thought you might like to see the teacher's view. They can flip through all the questions in the bank, almost like a flip file, you know, and just a click and look through every questions available for an SOL. In reporting, that's going to be the most exciting thing for teachers because they're going to be able to see every view they can possibly want from one page. In our former system, we had to click through a series of several pages just to get to a report. And that became cumbersome. And often principals would have teachers do all the searching and print out a report for them. And that won't be necessary anymore. This is a page that shows reporting. It's on the left. This is a training page, actually, that shows the school and the teachers in that school. Underneath each teacher, it cascades down to every student. So if I'm sitting in my office, and we just gave a benchmark, I can see how Hampton City did on that benchmark, how every single school did on that benchmark, how every teacher in that school did on that benchmark, and every kid in that school did on that benchmark, just in that left-hand column. So it's really a nice view in a lot of different ways. Let's go back just one. Under criteria summary there, a copy of the exam is where that PDF is. If it's a non-secure thing that a teacher created, they can see their exam. If it's a benchmark, it says access denied. So they can't see the benchmark. But every time you see a PDF symbol or a print symbol, that means a teacher can get a report from that, or a principal can get a report from that. So if you click on any of those particular icons, you can see a report of the number of schools tested, gives me an overview, or the number of classes tested, or so forth. Now on the right is the really nice thing, and that's your pass rate. In green are the percentage of students who passed at 70%, because that little button up there, cut score, says 70%, but that can be adjusted to anything that any principal or teacher wants. If I want to move that cut score up to 80%, they can move it there and then they can see, did that make a big change in my pass rate? That, the green side there can be clicked on and a report generates showing you every kid that passed. If you click on the right side, it generates a report of every kid who failed. And then by skill, it does the same thing. And you can see right here at a glance that 2 skills are much stronger on this test than the other 5. And what we'll usually see is there are some skills students absolutely get and others they have trouble with, but every one of those colors is a click to see who it is. It turns into a report. All those numbers there remind the teacher of what SOL we were testing. If they don't have them memorized, you know, they're not a walking, talking Paula Brown, you know how it is with that memorizing stuff, then they can look at that SOL quickly and know what skill that was. This is how it cascades down to the question. And I thought this was a really good example. This is actually one of our skills, that this class was very successful on this particular skill. There were 2 questions. The first question they did very, very well in the 90s, and the second question they did very poorly. But what it shows is Distractor 2 was heavily picked by the students who failed this question. And if you look down at the answer, you'll see the correct answer was 3 3/4, and the correct answer was 3 3/4, and the kids who got it wrong picked 3 1/2. So they know right away, the teacher knows, that's an easy fix. They've just got some confusion between quarters and halves, and we can clear that up. So that shows them very quickly what to fix. On a benchmark, there's no question there, so how would they do that? Every question has a number, and so they take that number from the benchmark, put it in a go-to button, and it will give them every question in the bank that is like the one on the test. So they have that at their fingertips. And the last feature is the help feature, and this is probably my favorite because you can get help in a million different ways. Let's go one more. There is a user manual for people who like to read it. This is all about modalities and differentiation right here. If you just like to print out the page or look at the pages and read it yourself, you can do that. Under video tutorials, you can get a 1 to 3 minute tutorial on any step of any process of any piece of this. So if you just want a quick reminder how to add a student or how to take one out or how to set up my test session, it'll talk you through it. The man is very nice and he talks very slowly. You will really like that. Remember our really good friend from Phoebus that made us those videos? Very much like that. Not scary at all. Last year, they recorded numerous webinars on the processes. So these are longer. These are about 20 to 30 minutes long, but they are so clear. I have watched them several times to make sure that I'm getting the processes correctly. But every teacher has access to all the webinars of all the processes. Then they have a GoToAssist, which is a chat. When you click on there, you can chat with the people at IA and they will walk you through whatever problem you're having. You can ask them anything, whatever it is. If you can't do it, they will, with your permission, take over your computer and drive the process themselves. So if you've just thrown your hands up and you cannot do this, you're so frustrated, they will just walk it through for you and they will draw arrows while they do it so you can see how they're doing it. So that's a really nice piece as well. We also are providing training as ourselves as well as another resource. Here is what the student would see. This is very much like the test nav that Pearson Access provides with your tools on the left, a back and next button, a review. Now you'll notice the names are a little different because all of Pearson's names would be what? Copyrighted. So we have to always be very careful that we rename things, but it's basically the same processes and they're very close. So you'll see that there. Teachers can actually make sections where students can use a calculator and other sections where they can't use a calculator. They're able to do a lot of different configurations for students with all those tools. There's a little place where they can click which tools they'd like the students to have for that test. And they can appear and disappear, which Pearson doesn't do. Thought that was really neat. This summer, we are training anybody that is walking, breathing, and continues to be a life form in Virginia. I have, my assistant, Linda Abernathy, and I have trained 300 people on how to write assessments in the last 2 weeks. We are also conducting super user trainings. That's 4 to 8 people at every school to provide support at the school. You know, kind of with the face on it, flesh there in the building. Administrator training will happen next week on training them on how to read reports and how to get the reports they want. Title I schools, curriculum leaders are being trained, already been trained. CITT are being trained last year and this year. And back to school training will be new teacher training, high school training, gifted center training, non-Title I elementary school training, as well as in September, middle school training, pre-K through 8 school training, ongoing topical training, Tuesdays through Thursdays every week, special group training, and on-site help. So we hope we've covered every possible way. But if you can go back 8 years to Solar, that's how it was those first 3 months. We trained every day, every type of user, weak user, strong user, and we did that for 3 years, the first of the year for several months. So it's going to take a while for everyone to feel completely comfortable, but the more you use it, I tell the teachers, you can't break it, just keep using it. It saves every 15 seconds, so your stuff is not lost. You just have to find it again, and it's really a great program. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got a couple more slides. Oh, I'm sorry. I just want you to know there's future capacity. There's more that we can do with this than we can do now. It has the capacity for teachers to write their own questions. It has the capacity to create group of test writers out in the field to send us questions to help with benchmarks. Instead of making teachers come in the summer and sit in a round room, they can sit at home, write questions, and get them approved. Yes, and I think there's one. And the future development is they continue to add questions. We're getting technology-enhanced items this fall, and the audio component for special ed is a feature that's coming soon. That is the end.
Questions from members of the board? Ms. Henry?
It seems a whole lot simpler than Solar ever seemed to me. And it's nifty. You know, the nifty factor always has a whole lot to do with everybody's willingness to dive in. I just you all have in your library a benchmark test for everything. 4 of them, a lot of them. You've already entered those questions in as Hampton City Schools questions, but they're blind if they're a benchmark question?
That's true. I can see them, but no one else can see them.
Okay, but...
Our curriculum people can see them.
Right. So as you roll out your benchmark this fall, you're going to be able to say, okay, our current benchmark is here, but we know this curriculum has been tweaked, so you can look in the bank of questions and see if you have some that you like. Or you can refresh your current benchmark ones with maybe technology or whatever from the bank. And then you can also just say, we've used this question 8 times. The teachers are bound to know somehow that this is on there. Let's change the question around. But you can basically give the same benchmark you gave last fall if you're really crazy about it, and just roll it out in this neat format and not have had to kill yourself.
You hit on a perfect point. That is one of the beauty. We will be this year finishing loading all the benchmarks. We loaded a good number last year because we piloted it in Title I schools, but we're going to load the rest of them. But after this, it is just editing. You will go, all the curriculum leaders and teacher specialists will go right on the site, pull out the questions they don't want, put the new ones in, or edit anything that they want to edit. So it won't be uploading every year. It will just be doing what they want to do with it. And we're going to create on the site from this point on instead of loading things, because it's much easier just to write it right in.
A whole lot less man hours in the process, besides all the printing and distributing and all those man hours.
Yes, and it's completely firewall. No one in any other locality can see our questions, nor can we see theirs.
Really cool.
Any other questions? Mr.
Just
Kilgore?
a compliment for the Trekkies. I saw that Captain Kirk had the highest average of any student, including Albert Einstein. So I'm sure the Trekkies appreciate that.
I called IA and I said, do you have any really great slides that I could use in this presentation? So they sent me 4 and I took 2 of them and that was one of theirs. Yeah, they like to make up some really interesting names on there. Definitely do.
And anybody over here? Questions? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Brown.
You are very welcome.
Dr. Shiflett, is that it for you?
That concludes our reports.
Okay. We move on to the hearing of any delegations and presentation of any written communications or petitions. Speakers are required to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes in accordance with School Board Policy BDDH. And I have one request to speak, and that is from Mr. David Dietrich. How did you know I was calling you first?
Fancy that. Good evening, Mrs. Mugler, members of the school board, Dr. Shiflett, and Mr. Booth. Good to see you up there. My name is David Dietrich, 139 Wilderness Road. It's obvious there are some exceptional students in this school system, and you've been recognizing them quite adequately. It's also obvious there's some very good work being done on their behalf. But I will continue to attempt to make an impact myself as well on the performance of this school system, and in particular the school board. I have several main issues. Again, open meetings, school choice, and community empowerment. Mrs. Mugler, you stated at your first meeting, leading as chairman, that you wanted open dialogue and discussion. I'm still waiting for that to happen. I am a concerned member of the community, and I'm just wondering if that's saying something and then doing something different. Mrs. Henry, I think, reflects the true nature of this school board. I think she wishes to hold open meetings only because the law requires it, and public interest is not important. And I have yet to hear any response from any of you on any comments I've made, either in public or privately. So what does the school board do? It continues to hold regular closed meetings, and it holds open meetings without public discussion. What is the purpose of this school board? I have one case in point to support my argument here, or my case. I have the form here to request addressing the school board. There's nothing on here that allows choosing to address an issue about school board policy. It only requests that somebody has had a discussion with the superintendent. I'm here about school board policy. I ask that you change this form to reflect that. Next issue, school choice. I think to improve our school system, you need to make it more competitive. You need to give students or children in the community, through their parents, more options on where their children may attend school. I think there are too many restrictions, and what this does is it makes everybody mediocre. There's a new Gallup poll that just came out. In the 40 years that this poll has been taken, 29% of Americans have confidence in our public school system. That is atrocious. So it's the lowest level ever recorded, and I'd like to know what this school board in particular will be doing about that. My son took an AP advanced placement class last year. He got an A in that class. He took the advanced placement test and got a 1. I would really like to know how that's possible when he can do so well in the class and completely fail an exam based on what he learned in that class. I contend that that's a problem with either grade inflation or poor teaching in that class. Last issue, community involvement. That's me. We can make a difference. I can make a difference. Positive change in our school system can only come at the local level. It should not depend on the federal government or even the state government. The PTA, in particular, needs to become a part of the solution. They have the resources to make that happen. I proposed last meeting a blue ribbon panel to get this effort started. Again, I'm still awaiting a response, either publicly or privately, on making that happen. We need to start now. I don't see in this school board, in your response and your actions, that you really care about our children. I think you're closing doors deliberately to the children's better performance later in life. Open meetings provide a connection. School choice provides the opportunity for our children, and community involvement provides the energy to make that happen. You know why I'm here. I'd like to know why you're all here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dietrich, for your comments. Are there any other requests to address the board? There being none, we'll move on to our items for action. And that would be in section 5. We'll move on to item number 5.01, First Amendment to the site lease at Mallory Elementary School.
Madam Chairman, I move that we adopt item 5.1 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Henry and seconded by Mrs. Phillips that we adopt the First Amendment to the site lease of Mallory Elementary School. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. We move on to item 5.02, new school board policy EA, support services.
Madam Chair, I move approval of item 5.02, new school board policy EA, support services.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Harper that we approve the new school board policy EA, support services. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.03, revision of school board policy EBCD, emergency closings. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of item 5.03, revision of school board policy EBCD, emergency closings.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mrs. Henry that we approve the revision of school board policy EBCD, emergency closings. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.05, revision of school board policy ECAB, report of vandalism.
Did we skip 5.04?
Skip one.
I'm sorry. Moving back to item 5.04, revision of school board policy EC, integrated pest management on school property, formerly buildings and grounds management.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the revision to school board policy EC, integrated pest management on school property.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Mrs. Phillips that we approve the revision to school board policy EC, integrated pest management on school property, formerly buildings and grounds management. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Oops, sorry, I moved myself ahead a little too far. Moving now to 5.05, revision of school board policy ECAB, report of vandalism.
Madam Chair, I move approval of revision to school board policy ECAB, report of vandalism.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Mrs. Henry that we approve the revision of school board policy ECAB, report of vandalism. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Moving on to item 5.06, deletion of school board policy EFE, security supervisor.
Move approval, Madam Chairman, of the deletion of former policy EFE as presented in item 5.06.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Henry and seconded by Mrs. Phillips that we delete school board policy EFE, security supervisor. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on now to item 5.07, revision of School Board Policy FB, Facilities Planning.
Madam Chair, I move approval of 5.07, revision of School Board Policy FB, Facilities Planning.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Kilgore that we revise School Board Policy FB, Facilities Planning. Is there any discussion? No change on. There being no discussion, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.08, deletion of School Board Policy FC, Facilities Capitalization Program.
Madam Chairman, can we combine those since they all
Are being
reference
deleted.
deletion because of the
Okay, so we're going to go, we'd like to combine 5.08, 9, 10, and 11.
they're all deleted for the same reason? I'm just asking, can you combine those?
I would entertain a motion to
Okay.
such.
Then I move for approval of the deletion of the following policies: FC, Facilities Capitalization Program; FEC, Facilities Development Plans and Specifications; FEE, Site Acquisition Procedure; and FEF, Construction Contracts, Bidding and Awards.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Pearson and seconded by Mrs. Henry that we combine items 5.08, 5.09, 5.10, and 5.11. The deletion of School Board Policy FC, Facilities Capitalization Program. Next being FEC, Facilities Development Plans and Specifications. Moving on to Policy FEE, Site Acquisition Procedure. And the final being FEF, Construction Contracts, Bidding and Awards. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. The motion carries. We move on to item 5.12, revision of School Board Policy GCBBA, Recovery of Back Pay.
Madam Chair, I move approval of 5.12, revision of School Board Policy GCBBA, Recovery of Back Pay.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Kilgore that we revise policy GCBBA, Recovery of Back Pay. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, Ms. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.13, revision of School Board Policy GCBBB, Callback Pay.
Madam Chair, I move approval of revision to School Board Policy GCBBB, Callback Pay.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Mrs. Phillips that we revise policy GCBBB, Callback Pay. Is there any discussion? There being none, Mrs. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.14, deletion of School Board Policy GCLA, Staff Visitations and Conferences.
Madam Chair, I move approval of deletion of School Board Policy GCLA, Staff Visitations and Conferences.
Second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Pearson that we delete School Board Policy GCLA, Staff Visitations and Conferences. Is there any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Henry.
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore.
Aye.
Mr. Pearson.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Harper.
Aye.
Ms. Mugler.
Aye, motion carries. Item 5.15, deletion of school board policy GCM, supervision of professional staff.
Madam Chair, I move for the deletion of school board policy GCM, supervision of professional staff.
Second. It has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mrs. Smith that we delete school board policy GCM, supervision of professional staff. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Kilgore.
Aye.
Mr. Pearson.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Harper.
Aye.
Ms. Henry.
Aye.
Ms. Mugler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.16, deletion of school board policies GCO, professional staff promotions, and GCO-R, professional staff promotion regulations.
Madam Chairman, since we've had a different edit of that presented this evening, I move that we move this item from action to deliberation this evening.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Henry and seconded by Mrs. Phillips that we move item 5.16 from action to deliberation. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, Mrs. Bowers, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Pearson.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Harper.
Aye.
Ms. Henry.
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore.
Aye.
Ms. Mugler.
Aye. Motion carries. So that will be moved to deliberation. That concludes our action items. We move on now to deliberation. We start with item 6.01, VPSA resolution. And do we have, Dr. Hellman, do you have something for us on that, sir?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Inasmuch as we have in our budget technology funds that will be from the proceeds of the spring 2013 VPSA bond sale, and inasmuch as the code requires that local governing bodies adopt a resolution of their notification of intent to reimburse themselves with those proceeds, this resolution is being offered to you for consideration. It's a standard resolution that the board has adopted on an annual basis. It's somewhat pro forma, but yet it keeps us legal with the state and all of the various codes that regulate bond sales and proceeds of the bond sales. In essence, the state, through the Virginia Public Service Authority, will issue bonds in the spring of 2013, and then these funds will then be dispersed throughout the school division or throughout the state to the various school divisions. It's $26,000 per school plus $50,000 per division, and then we have 3 additional schools that I've noted in the cover letter because of the accreditation of those schools. So that is what the intent of this resolution is.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hellman. Are there questions from the board? There being none, we'll move on to item 6.02, which is a new school board policy reporting hazards. I believe, Dr. Hellman, you have that one.
Yes, ma'am. During previous discussions, there had been some indication that the board would like to see the reporting hazards and the restriction of toxic materials in elementary schools separated so that one policy dealt strictly with reporting hazards while another policy dealt with the toxic art materials. The policy EBAA is presented to you to address the reporting of hazards. I would like to note that we have received a recommendation And I think that it would probably clear up in as much as the policy EBAA reads, the Hampton School Board shall evaluate all materials used by the division and shall identify those which are toxic. The board actually does not evaluate the materials, and the recommendation would be to change that verbiage so that it would read something similar to the Hampton School Board shall ensure that all materials used by the division are evaluated and identified for toxicity in accordance with the criteria developed by the State Department of Health. Meeting this, by the State Department of Health, materials meeting the criteria as toxic and shall be so identified. So that would be our recommended change to that policy.
Any questions from board members in addition to that? All right, sir. We'll move on to item 6.03, revision of school board policy EBCE, restriction of toxic materials in elementary schools.
Yes, ma'am. This policy basically precludes the use of any identified toxic materials in grades K through 5. It also indicates that the superintendent will designate a designee to evaluate and label the toxicity of all art supplies used in the division.
Are you going to make the same changes, I guess, to this, since we're not evaluating toxicity?
That's the language or the policy here basically says the superintendent shall name a designee to evaluate and label toxicity of all art materials used in the division, so that the designee would be the individual responsible for the evaluation, not necessarily the board.
But didn't we just change the reporting of hazards saying that we don't evaluate the materials?
Personally do. We don't.
Right.
The school board does it, okay, but we have an employee that does that. I thought,
This one says the superintendent
Okay.
shall name a designee.
All
The
right.
one before that had the board, and that's what he changed to, that we
Okay.
would ensure it.
all right. Madam Chair, one other thing on this one, the paragraph that we've added now talks about materials used in the division, but the title specifically relates only to elementary schools. Is that still consistent now that we've added that sentence? I know that we prohibit toxic materials in K through 5, but the new sentence talks about used in the division. So should it just be restriction of toxic materials in schools? Or do we want to focus it to elementary schools only, which is in line with the code, I guess?
The code requests that it's specific to elementary.
Pretty sure it does. The code talks to certain grades.
Yes.
And,
Well, I think if we, Dr. Hellman, if we just made the title restriction of toxic materials in schools, but the fact that we are breaking it out in the verbiage to elementary, kindergarten through 5 would capture all of that. And make the title more appropriate to the verbiage.
We can certainly make that change.
Anybody have is that good with everybody? Okay, anything further on EBCE? We move on to item 6.04, new school board policy FA, facilities development.
Yes, ma'am. This policy talks about facilities development and more specifically some of the broad-brushed goals of the school board in terms of how they look to develop their facilities. There are 5 criteria or 5 facets that are identified that the board would aim towards. I would like to point out, for example, item 4 addresses considering building design and construction that will lend themselves to low maintenance cost and the conservation of energy. There had been a question on that regarding a previous policy, or I'm sorry, a future policy that's coming up. And what about, the facilities development? So in this, we do talk about energy conservation as future facilities are being developed. And then there were some changes to item 5 or paragraph 5 so that it would basically read, the board aims specifically towards developing educational specifications for new buildings and those undergoing extensive remodeling with consideration provided for the viewpoints of teachers, students, and the community. And that was a change that was recommended at the work session 2 weeks ago.
Anything further on that policy? Any questions for Dr. Hellman on that? Okay, we move on to item 6.05, deletion of school board policy FBA, facilities planning advisors. Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Hellman?
We recommend the deletion of this policy in as much as it outlines a city process, not a Hampton City Schools process.
Anything from the board? Okay, we move on to item 6.06, new school board policy FE, playground equipment.
Madam Chair, we made a few changes subsequent to the meeting at the work session. We've also been in contact with Mr. Jim Wilson at Parks and Rec, and they do in fact maintain records. They do have the inspections done in accordance with the code as required and as outlined within this policy.
Anything further? All right, we move on to item 6.07, new school board policy FEA, educational facility specifications.
Madam Chair, this policy basically talks about the fact that the educational specifications are going to drive the design of the facility, and it also talks about energy efficiency shall be considered in the architectural evaluation when the board looks at hiring the architect. Energy conservation that would be there, and we've made the changes that were outlined or reviewed with the board at the last meeting.
Okay.
It's just a little typo in the edited edition. Shall be considered.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
In the cross-references on that one, Dr. Hellman, we struck through the energy efficiency construction, but I know later in deliberation, we actually just retitled that policy energy conservation. Is there a reason that we eliminated the cross-reference to it versus just leaving it and changing it to the different title?
Well, the policy itself, FEA, does address energy efficiency shall be considered.
Okay.
We could certainly include the cross-reference if that was, the will of the board. See, the policy that you're referencing, Mr.
Okay, we
Kilgore-
deleted the words that would make it cross-referenceable?
Right, it no longer addresses construction per se, it just
Okay.
addresses the board's commitment to
Right, okay.
conservation.
No, I'm good. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Anything further on FEA? Okay, we move on to item 6.08, new school board policy FECBA, energy efficient construction.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, this is the policy that we were alluding to, and it just basically indicates that the board acknowledges all reasonable measures should be taken to conserve energy. It was very interesting. After we went back from the last work session, based on some of the issues that Mrs. Henry had raised, And through the powers of Google and going out and looking at other divisions, trying to see what they were doing, apparently the vast majority of the other divisions that are located in the Commonwealth did not share some of the concerns that Ms. Henry had expressed, and of course I believe her concerns were very valid. So we were continuing to search and look, and we did come across some language that we then massaged, and that is in effect what you have before you tonight.
Anything from the board? Any concerns on FECBA? And I had Dr. Hellman asked you about the architectural evaluation and construction. You said that's covered in another policy.
Yes, ma'am. That was in FA.
We move into item 6.09, new school board policy FECBB, accommodations for the disabled.
Yes, ma'am. This is a statutory requirement, and basically it, as outlined by Ms. Reeves at the last meeting, she indicated that this is in policy and would ultimately assist the board if there were to be any kind of ADA claims or suits that might be filed by having this policy.
Anything further on that, Ms. Reeves?
I don't think so. It simply is, it's codified in the federal code, but VSBA is recommending that we at least have this short policy so that we acknowledge that exists, and that's one of our burdens.
Okay. Everyone happy with that? We move on to item 6.10, new school board policy FEG, construction planning.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. We have inserted the first paragraph as was recommended at the board work session to indicate that the school board will approve the development of the educational specifications, and then it goes on to discuss the various components of those specifications and some of the legal requirements that are outlined in the code.
Anything from board members? Mr. Kilgore, did you have some?
We're going to approve the development of. Right? We're not approving the specifications or the documents prior to their submittal to the Superintendent of Public Education. We're just approving the development of those documents.
That is as the wording says, yes.
That's correct?
Yes, sir.
Anything further, Ms. Henry?
This is, that paragraph has got to be right out of the code, Ms. Reeves, right? Because it's awful. No public school building or addition or alteration thereto for either permanent or temporary use shall be advertised or be until the plans and specifications thereof is what that is. That therefore doesn't make sense. Until the plans and specifications thereof have been approved in writing. Therefore is not the correct word. Am I reading that right now? I mean, you can't, okay, the plans and specifications, they can't be acquired or until the plans thereof have been approved in writing. Not specifications therefore have been approved in writing.
It's in line 3 of the second paragraph.
Mm-hmm. We corrected a typo and made it worse somehow.
But you got it right out of the code.
I'm not going to comment on the legislature. I'm not going to comment on how the legislature writes.
Yeah, I mean, it's straight out of the code.
I'm sure it is,
Verbatim.
but they can't write. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense that way, does it? There aren't specifications that have therefore been approved. I don't know, I've got to think about that one, Mr. Hellman. I've got to read it again before it makes sense to me.
Specifications therein. Yeah, it should.
It should be thereof.
Go ahead.
I'm going to jump.
Go
I'm gonna
ahead.
jump back to mine. I think when we last talked at the work session about adding something to where the board had some level of improvement or approval of the documents, the way this is currently worded, we don't approve the documents at all. We just approve their development. And then they potentially can be developed and submitted to the Superintendent of Public Education without coming back in front of the board. I don't believe that was our intent.
You're correct.
We could strike the development.
Yeah, just the development of, and we'll approve the
Yeah, just-
educational specifications and other planning documents.
Right. We'll approve yep. The development of is.
So strike those three words, is that?
They are stricken.
Okay. Anything further?
3 words or 2 words?
Be
words.
three.
The development of.
The development of would be stricken.
It'll just say, will approve educational specifications and other planning documents prior.
Okay, so you don't want the educational specifications, okay.
I think
Yeah,
it's
either
fine
way.
with educational. I don't think you need the.
You got a the in front of the next one? We're doing parallel. No, we don't. Leave the gone.
Leave it on.
Leave it off. Gone,
No.
gone, you said, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 words.
So we're striking 3 words.
Yes.
And we will change their for to thereof.
Yes, sir. Okay. We move on to item 6.11, revision of school board policy FFGA, supervision of construction.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. This policy was basically changed based on some recommendations that had come forward at the work session as well. You'll note mainly that the duties of the individual who is overseeing the construction have been bulleted to help ease of reading, along with correctly citing the new document, or I think it's as of 2010 guideline for school facilities in Virginia Public Schools.
Okay, Dr. Hellman, I think I sent you an email. Some of these bullets need to go back with the sentence they went with, because it says there's a clerk of the works or whoever our project engineer is, and their duties may include but are not limited to daily project surveillance. I would strike daily and just say project surveillance. Preparation of a construction diary, again, I wouldn't say daily, outlining various disciplines of work being accomplished, and then weather conditions, numbers and types of mechanics, materials, all belong with the construction diary, because we're not going to make the person responsible for the weather conditions. I think he's not really responsible for the numbers and types of mechanics or the materials delivered. That would be part of a diary, a construction diary.
Correct. Correct. Yes, ma'am. Because those are often things that the contractor will cite in
And
terms
again,
of delays.
depending on the project, we certainly want reasonable supervision, and there have been times when we didn't get reasonable supervision, but I think daily supervision is perhaps not required.
Okay.
Anything further?
I can just tell you that with respect to litigation that you all were involved with site preparation on another project involving one of our pre-K through 8, daily project surveillance should be something that's required.
I'm glad you said that.
Had we had daily project surveillance, it would have saved quite a bit.
Anything further?
Just the bullets down there, some of them are verbs and some nouns, just to align those, so like.
I was reading that. I will try to align them.
So with those changes, are we comfortable moving this forward to action? I hear and I think so. Okay. Okay. Anything further? Very well, we'll move on to 6.12. Revision of School Board Policy FF, naming new facilities. The new number is FFA.
Right. It will go back to FF. It's hard to see where the green line has stricken through the A because it has stricken through the A right there at the line that goes through, but it would remain as policy FF.
Oh, okay, I'm reading straight from the agenda, which says, in parentheses, new number is FFA, so. But that's not a new number, it's FF.
It is FF, yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bowers, will you make sure that's clear on the record?
And we have gone through and taken the comments that we received from the board at the last work session, but have also received some other comments, and perhaps the language should be changed to read, the school board may empower a committee of stakeholders which may include up to 2 members of the board to review submissions and make a recommendation to the board, as opposed to limiting it to just a single member of the board serving on the committee.
Say that all again, Dr. Hellman.
Empower
You
or
said
impanel?
empower.
Or impanel?
I'm sorry,
Okay, all right.
impanel. The school board may impanel a committee of stakeholders which may include up to 2 members of the board to review submissions and make a recommendation to the board.
Are you making a recommendation to change the wording that was?
I actually made the recommendation
Okay.
to Dr. Hellman because that would follow the policy that we most recently used.
Okay, so the one on BoardDocs doesn't reflect that wording, or does?
It does not
It
reflect
does
the
not.
2, it just
Okay.
reflects 1.
I got you. All right.
And the word is may, so that the board at its option, if it
But
wishes.
stay out of it.
So it may include up to 2 members?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the reason 2 is because more than 2 is a meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything further on policy FF? We move on to 6.13, new school board policy FG, retirement of facilities.
Yes, ma'am, this is a policy that would outline considerations and factors for the board to consider for future, hopefully in a long, long, long time from now, if there were to be any future consolidations of schools. But this would at least document and put into policy some of those things that should be considered when making a recommendation to consolidate a facility.
Comments from board members? There being none, we'll move on to 6.14, revision of school board policy JCJ, classroom assignments for twins. And
I'll jump in, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you.
This, while not in my area, is simply a code provision change that needs to be, that was caught by VSBA. They changed E to F in the Virginia Code, and we need to change it.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Okay, we move on to 6.15, revision of school board policy BBFA, board member conflict of interest. And Ms. Reeves, do you have anything on that?
Yes, this simply is a policy that needs to have references to the Virginia Code updated, and that's what's being done. Particularly with the conflict of interest, there are additional code provisions that were recommended to be added.
Okay. Questions from board members?
I was a little confused by that first sentence. This is about board member conflict of interest, but it lists employees of the school board or families should have no financial interest in any contract or transaction. I mean, don't we do budget and things for the employees of the school board? I guess I just need some clarification on, shouldn't it just be school board members, period, and their families? I know that's not why it's being revised, but it just, when I read it, thought that was
Isn't
odd.
it like, say I had a business, are you referring, if I had a business to one of my employees?
The principal of a school can't hire somebody to redecorate his office that's his family members, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it applies to Hampton City School employees as.
But this is specifically for board members, right?
The title says board member conflict of interest.
I understand.
And then, well, then it says employees of the Hampton School Board.
And it says any transaction entered by the board, so that'd be like the salaries of all the employees. I guess
I'm not sure. What's your question specifically in regard to? What part of that?
That first sentence where it says, board members, officers, and employees of the school board or their families shall have no financial interest in any contract or any transaction entered into by the board. There's 2 points I have there. One is the title is board member conflict of interest, not all employees. And then the second thing is, doesn't the board have transactions that directly affect the financial interest of our employees?
The budget, if you're referring to, there's a
right,
disclaimer
like
that every board member who has. Now,
they
for
make-
example, no board member can have a member of their family hired while you're on the board.
Correct.
So, but if they were already already employed, that they're not subject to losing their position.
But this says.
But then there's a disclaimer that every board member gives when they vote on the budget.
Right, I understand that, but this says that employees shall have no financial interest, not just board members. This is.
Right, but that would mean.
So I guess that's where I'm a little.
Well, it says in any contract or any transaction. Now, I guess the way I'm reading it is, say I had a electrical contracting business, and y'all were building a new school. My company could not benefit from that, or bid on that, or do that work. Is that what it's trying to say?
Under the Conflict of Interest Act, if you would garner more than $10,000 as a result of that
But when it
contract,
says
yes, you
for
would have a conflict.
employees of the Hampton School Board,
I believe when this was drafted, they probably simply included employees also because there is, contained elsewhere, I think, within your policies is also the fact that employees are not supposed to have financial interests in certain transactions or contracts that you all, the board, would be approving.
but I think she's trying to ask, is it Hampton City School employees? Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they say employees, do they mean Hampton City School employees? Or is this just about the board? If I had an employee that they would not garner financial, they would not be able to have a financial interest. I couldn't.
No, it's employees of the board.
So who are our employees? The
Dr.
Hampton City School.
Ms. Reeves, I think it's the title saying specifically board member.
Correct.
And then in the paragraph speaking about employees of Hampton City Schools.
Correct.
So is it just a pure conflict of interest, or is it board member conflict of interest?
Right.
Right.
The employees is not a board member conflict of interest. And we can certainly take employees out if you want to. It's simply restating the fact that you don't let employees or yourselves or any officers, unless there's an otherwise reason why you're exempted by law from having a financial interest in contracts. And when they use transaction, they're talking about contractual transactions. They're not talking about adopting the budget. But
Yeah.
they're talking about contractual,
Yeah, I think that's what they mean, but adopting the budget is a transaction we do, so. I mean, if it's clear for everybody else, that's fine. I just was a little.
Well, this is a board, under the section of board governance and operations. So if it is board conflict of interest, it is logical to leave out or employees and just say board members or officers of the Hampton School Board or their families.
That would
Okay.
address what
I'm
I'm
assuming
talking
employees
about.
are covered somewhere else?
Madam Chair,
Can we find that out?
my question
Yes,
is, for other things like gratuities and things like that, do we have a personnel policy that covers employees? I don't think we do. So this,
we do not.
okay, so, and my point would be that although the first sentence looks like awkward, this is the only policy that we currently have that talks about prohibited conduct of employees. Or
And-
gratuities and, accepting things that would influence their decision, their duties, and things like that.
And you all have not adopted the VSBA policy on conflict of interest, which is actually about 8 pages long. But I will say that even theirs goes through a long list of definitions, and one of the definitions included in their policy is employee, and then on in what they recommend is that you do actually discuss the fact that that employees, are included in those that cannot have a conflict of interest. So even the VSBA recommends it in this portion of your board governance and operations that you talk about the prohibitive conduct regarding transactions, and you include employees.
Why don't you, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Why don't you just expand the title and add employees to that? Since it talks about employees in the
Ms. Reeves, are
first
you
paragraph.
saying that VSBA has a separate employee code of conduct
No,
policy?
no, it is their recommendation for policy BBFA. And
It's
they,
8 pages, so it basically copies
it
the-
goes through, everything that is in Virginia Code Section 2.23119, and it goes through it in very, very, it's very detailed. In fact, they actually have 2 versions depending on which planning district you all are in. I think we're in one. So it is actually 10 pages long. I was not recommending that you adopt this big, long one, but if you are so inclined, we can take this back and put the long one in.
Take the little one out.
What you
Some
have-
abbreviated version of the long one?
Actually, what you have has served you well for some time, and it appropriately references the code sections that are being changed regularly by the Virginia General Assembly. So your shorter version really just takes you, and if you go look at the most recent code version, you're put in good stead instead of having 9 pages that you're going to be continually.
Instead of having a longer policy, could we just have a longer title that says board member and employee conflict of interest?
Why can't we have a shorter title, just conflict of interest?
It's under board
Because
governance.
the text covers who the conflict of interest is addressing, right?
Right.
I will make it whichever way you all.
So what is the will?
Short, conflict of interest.
Everyone comfortable with that?
And if this is under that section for board governance, is this cross-referenced in the employee policies so that that's recognized, or is that not necessary?
Cross-reference to GBAC.
Yeah.
I mean, like, does GBAC reference this one, or does any personnel ones reference this to make sure that they realize there's a conflict of interest, I guess? Or is there even a need, like going in circles?
Well, I certainly think that in conjunction with Ms. Ruth, if we may be able to find one where we could cross-reference it back from an employee.
Yeah, we can either cross-reference it to GBAC, or in many cases, we have a duplicate policy with a separate number. One would be BBFA, and then the same identical policy under personnel policies, which would be G, whatever Carolyn says it should be.
We can do you a dual policy. We've done that on other occasions. And just give it a G number as well, same title.
That makes sense, I think.
Okay, so we all clear on the changes? All right, we'll see it when it comes back up in print, and we'll know for sure. Thank you all. That concludes our deliberation. We move on to...
Ms. Mugler.
Point of order. We still have two. They were moved back. G, CO.
5.16 that we moved to.
I don't have a 5.16.
The ones we moved from action to deliberation earlier.
Pardon me.
GCO.
Okay. I'm still in the sixes. Okay, I'm sorry. We move back then to item 5.16, which is now, is that going to be a different, would that be considered 6.16 now?
Where we
For the
are.
record? Okay.
What?
Yes. The item which we voted to move from action into deliberation is policy GCO, professional staff promotions, and GCO-R, professional staff promotion regulations. Is there discussion on that?
The main thing I saw was the purpose of the deletion was because they were procedural. But when we read through GCO and GCO-R, GCO-R does seem to be procedural, and that would apply for deletion, but the GCO actually has several items in there that were criteria and things that should probably flow down into a procedure that I didn't think that should be deleted. So a new wording's been worked up, which was handed out. There's a hard copy for just deleting all the items that are procedural and leaving in the key criteria things that should stay in there. Does that make sense?
I'm still not convinced that they need to go back. I have to think about it. I'd like it to stay on deliberation another week and not go to action next time. Because I still think some of the things are really procedural, and, you know, I have to think about it.
So would you prefer to lay aside this?
I'd prefer to have it go back onto deliberation next meeting instead of for action next meeting, so we can all look at it again.
Just for a little bit more information, just from what I looked at 5 or 6 other school divisions, just random school divisions, and pulled up what they have. And most of them have a generic recruiting and hiring policy, and then also one for, they had different titles, some promotions, some for administration for higher level, and they had them as separate, either separate policies or had the promotion part within that recruiting. So it seemed in line to have that, and also when I looked at this, there are some differences with the general hiring and recruiting versus the promotions, and one of the things that did contradict between our general recruiting and the staff promotions was in the general hiring and recruiting GCC, it says that preference will not, there will be no distinction between internal or external employees, but under promotions it says preference will be given to internal candidates. So there was a little bit there that is contradictory. That
I think that's the part I question.
Okay.
We have to think about that.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you'd like it to go on first read
Well, no, it'll just go on to.
For this week, I mean, for
Yes,
this week.
right.
So then next time
Right.
it's deliberation.
Which
Yeah.
the motion earlier was to move it
To
to
deliberation.
deliberation. So we need to have another motion on
Okay.
this to
Madam
move
Chair.
it if we don't want to keep it in the deliberation section to move to action next time.
Madam Chair, I move that we move item number GCO staff promotions to first read. Is that right?
Second. Thank you.
Okay, it has been moved by Mrs. Phillips and seconded by Mrs. Henry that we move policy GCO, professional staff promotions, and GCO-R, professional staff promotion regulations, to deliberation first read. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. The motion carries. Okay. According to my agenda, that concludes our deliberation section. Is that correct?
Did you want the
there-
administering
okay.
medicines on?
Ms. Mugler,
Yes, sir.
I want to share a concern, and it's in reference to maybe a direction we're taking, and it's also referencing some changes we're making in policy. I would like for someone to explain to me at some point, what is the scope of the role of the school board when we move from approval of development to approval of specifications? Are we talking about the fact that we're going to approve whether the classroom is going to be 20 feet by 30 feet as opposed to 25 feet by 25 feet? Are we approving that there'll be 6 urinals in the boys' bathroom as opposed to 5? How far are we going when we approve specifications, some of which some of us have a little knowledge about? And I'm suggesting that maybe, and on the side, we approve the development of a strategic plan, the development of a special ed plan, and development of a gifted plan, all which go to State Superintendent of Instruction. So maybe, I may be suggesting that at our retreat, that we have that item discussed so that we'll know that we're taking the right direction.
Yes, sir. And reference, please, Mr. Pearson, which item that is. It's 5.0.
6.10.
6.10.
6.10. I just want to make sure.
Sometimes it's just a change of words, but I think we all need to be sure of what we're approving, what we're putting on a policy, especially when it comes to specifications. And we're talking about new construction or the campus at Lee. How many of us know how many classrooms we need? What is the makeup of the classroom, the size of the classrooms, how high is the partition? I mean, any number of things can come into play. And take Andrews and Phoenix. If we were to approve every specification that went into those two schools, we'd be full-time employees.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we will take that up further. Yes, sir. Moving from deliberation to deliberation first read, we have items 7.01 through 7.07 for your leisure reading during this next 2 weeks.
And point of order, Mrs. Mugler, I added one to first read that I handed a hard copy
Yes,
out.
ma'am. Also, at our table, we were provided with a policy you all should have each received from Ms. Reeves, administering medicines to students. She'd like for us to consider that to be in our first read, and having physically given that to us tonight, for us to consider to put that on for deliberation next time so that it could be approved in time for school to begin.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe somebody could explain to me why, if a policy is recommended for deletion on first read, if it's recommended for deletion, why we just don't take it back to action for the next meeting instead of putting it back on deliberation? You follow what I'm saying?
I follow what you're saying, but I think people need time to to read through it and determine they're comfortable with the deletion. Just for example, as Ms. Smith brought up a policy tonight that was up for deletion and she wasn't comfortable with its being deleted. So it does give members an opportunity to review that for a slightly longer period.
Most cases, we just automatically approve the deletion when it comes on the action agenda anyway.
Correct.
But we take it back from deliberation, first read to deliberation, and then we eventually delete it anyway.
And that is something perhaps we could take up at our retreat and discuss further if we wanted to do that also.
Can I add a comment on that?
Yes.
Often on the deletions, we're coupling that with one policy that's going to, in many cases, adopt 2 or 3 points that are in 2 or 3 of the policies that are going to be deleted. And Carolyn's very careful. We try to put them through as paired together. Sometimes there'll be 3 or 4 that really need to be considered together so that you understand you've got one policy that's now incorporated 5. Does that make sense, Mr. Harper? Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Don't explain that again. Up until recently, though, we would go from deliberation to action. And we put the first read in.
And a lot that you're going to be getting in the near future are going to not even be in alphabetical order, for lack of a better term, because there are going to be 5 or 6 that all interact with one another or need to be aligned with one another. So we're going to have to keep them as packages together.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
You have a deletion that affects another policy, then I understand.
Okay.
Until that policy is brought on board, it's not finalized.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. You good? Anything further on first read? Okay, we move on to our information. Dr. Shiflett.
The Dr. Ismail Gundos came to visit us from Istanbul, Turkey this week, and we were able to take him to a number of our school sites, and he was with us for, about 45 minutes on both days, talking to us about some of our efforts dealing with students in poverty and how we're able to be successful in keeping them in school and reducing our dropout rates. So it was informative, too, to hear about some of the efforts that they're undertaking in Istanbul. And I believe, Ms. Phillips, did you meet him?
I did. I went over to Phoebus and met him, and must compliment Ms. Chambers on how well she was taking care of him, and he was very kind, very generous, very impressed, and very much wanted to know a lot about our system.
And then finally, our summer school will end tomorrow. So our young people have had about 16 days of extended learning in summer school.
Anyone else have any items for information? I have a few. Our next scheduled meeting of the school board will be a work session on Wednesday, August 15th at 6:30 at 1 Franklin Street. We also have a board retreat scheduled with VSBA in Charlottesville on August 29th at 10 a.m. At this point, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge our newly elected school board member, brand new to our board and sworn in at our last meeting. There was so much excitement on my part at our July early meeting that I neglected to acknowledge her, that she's brand new joining with us, Mrs. Monica Smith, and didn't know if you had any comments to share.
Well, thank you. Not really, except that I'm really excited to be working with y'all and this wonderful board and the Dr. Shiflett and the DLT, and all the support I've been given so far. I really, truly appreciate, and I just look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Glad to have you aboard. Also want to recognize and acknowledge Mr. Alan Booth, our newly appointed school board student liaison. He was appointed in July, and this is his first official meeting. It looks like he's fared pretty well down there. Anything to add tonight?
Besides the fact I turned my microphone off, Not really. However, I do look forward to working with each and every one of you over the course of the upcoming school year. And I'd like to apologize for not being here in July. And thank you for the excellent opportunity afforded to me by Hampton City Schools.
Great. Well, we are looking forward to working with you this year. Looking for great bit of information from you. I know we'll get that. Moving on to further announcements, assignments to standing boards and committees. Our WHRO board representative will be Phyllis Henry. WHRO board alternate, Jennifer Phillips. Our New Horizons board member will be Linwood Butch Harper. Our Career and Technical Education board member will be Mr. Joe Kilgore. Purchasing and Procurement Oversight Committee, Dave Pearson. And as announced last month, our VSBA voting delegate and legislative liaison will be Mrs. Jennifer Phillips, and our VSBA alternate delegate, Mr. Joe Kilgore. I think that is all I have. I think that is it. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, excuse me.
Madam Chair, pursuant to Section 2.2-3111A of the Code of Virginia, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing employee issues involving division employees, which is authorized by Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Second.
If I might share, because I just deleted my page. It has been moved by Mr. Kilgore. I'm sorry, Mr. Sherrouse, I'm not near my microphone. It has been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Mrs. Henry that pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia, we will convene in a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing employment issues involving division employees, which is authorized by Section 2.23-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia. And that is it. Is there any discussion? There being none, Ms. Bowers, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Harper?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye. Motion carries. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.